They demoted me right after I brought in a deal worth nearly $500 million. They thought I would silently swallow the humiliation, but they forgot that I was the one who held the key to relationships with the company's biggest clients. 3 months later, they lost all market share. As for me, I'm now leading my own company with the very clients they once considered impossible to lose. My name is Samantha Rourke. Sam to everyone who matters. I've spent 15 years building strategic partnerships in healthcare technology, the last 7 of those at Calvex Solutions in Austin. And I'm about to tell you how I went from being their star player to their biggest competition, not because I wanted revenge, but because some people are too short-sighted to understand what truly drives business. This is monumental. Sam, absolutely monumental. Marcus Dell, our legal director, had just finished reviewing the final terms of what would become Calvex's largest contract to date, a $480 million implementation deal with Euronova Health Group, a coalition of European hospital systems seeking to overhaul their patient management infrastructure. 9 months. That's how long I'd worked to bring this deal to fruition. 9 months of transatlantic flights, 4 a.m. calls to accommodate European time zones, and carefully navigating the complex regulatory landscape of 5 different EU countries. I'd personally met with 38 executives across the Euronova network, learning their pain points, their aspirations, and most importantly, earning their trust. The board meeting is tomorrow, Marcus continued, his usual stoic demeanor breaking into an uncharacteristic grin. Champagne's on me afterward. I smiled, allowing myself to feel the weight of the accomplishment. Nearly $500 million, more than triple our previous largest deal, the kind of contract that transforms a company's trajectory. Let's not celebrate until the signatures are dry, I cautioned, though internally I was already thinking about how I'd redecorate the corner office that would surely be mine after this. VP of Strategic Accounts was nice, but Chief Revenue Officer had a better ring to it. Little did I know, the leadership team had very different plans for my future. The signing ceremony with Euronova's leadership was everything corporate dreams are made of. Handshakes, photos, champagne flutes clinking under the ornate chandeliers of a rented venue in Brussels. CEO Julian Mercer gave a speech praising the unprecedented collaboration and the bright future ahead. He mentioned my name 4 times, calling me the architect of this historic partnership. I stood there, professional smile firmly in place, exhausted but triumphant. Beside me, Bryce Langston, our recently hired COO, clapped mechanically while scanning the room with cold calculation. I'd only interacted with him a handful of times since his arrival 6 months ago, but something about him had always felt off, like he was assessing everyone for weaknesses rather than strengths. 2 days later, back in Austin, I was called into Julian's office. I expected congratulations, perhaps discussion of my expanded role. Instead, I found Bryce sitting beside Julian, both wearing expressions that immediately sent a chill down my spine. Sam, first, I want to reiterate what an incredible job you've done with Euronova, Julian began, his voice carrying that particular cadence that comes before bad news. Truly remarkable work. Thank you, I said cautiously, my eyes darting between them. As you know, we've been working on restructuring to better position ourselves for this new phase of growth, he continued. With contracts of this magnitude, we need to ensure our implementation and client success structures are robust. I nodded slowly, unsure where this was heading. We've decided to create a new division, Bryce interjected, called Strategic Implementation. This team will handle the entire Euronova relationship moving forward. That makes sense, I replied, though confusion was beginning to bubble beneath my composed exterior. I'd be happy to collaborate with whoever leads. Actually, Julian interrupted, not quite meeting my eyes. We'd like you to transition into an advisory role, more of a senior consultant position. The words hung in the air between us. Advisory role, senior consultant, fancy terms for a demotion. I don't understand, I said finally, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. I just closed the largest deal in company history. And we're incredibly grateful, Bryce responded smoothly. But closing deals and implementing them require different skill sets. We've brought in Jade Merrick to lead the new division. She has extensive experience in large-scale implementations. Jade Merrick. The name was vaguely familiar. From Helix Systems. Yes, she's brilliant, Bryce enthused. Young, dynamic, exactly the kind of fresh perspective we need. Young, fresh, the subtext wasn't particularly subtle. And my team, I asked, thinking of the 6 account managers who had worked tirelessly alongside me. They'll report to Jade now, Julian said, his discomfort increasingly evident. Look, Sam, this isn't a demotion, it's a specialization. You'll still be involved, just differently. I sat there, absorbing the blow while maintaining my professional facade. 15 years of experience, 7 with this company, and the crowning achievement of my career had somehow resulted in being sidelined. It didn't make sense unless I looked at it through the lens of corporate politics. Bryce wanted his people in key positions. I wasn't his hire. I was Julian's. And Julian, it seemed, no longer had the backbone to stand up for his own people. I see, was all I said. When does this transition take effect? Immediately, Bryce replied, unable to hide the satisfaction in his voice. Jade starts Monday. I nodded, rose from my chair, and walked out with dignity intact. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. Not just disappointment or anger, though there was plenty of both, but a clarity I hadn't possessed before. They had made a catastrophic miscalculation, and they didn't even realize it. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find my personal items had already been moved from my spacious office to a smaller interior space with no windows. My email signature had been updated overnight. Samantha Rourke, Senior Advisory Consultant. My team looked shell-shocked when I gathered them for a brief meeting. They'd been informed of the restructuring via email. Most were confused. A few were openly angry on my behalf. This is bullshit, Sam, said Diana Chen, my longest-serving account manager. You built these relationships from nothing. None of us would even be here without you. It's business, I replied calmly. Things change. We adapt. But the Euronova executives specifically asked for you to lead the implementation, added Raj Patel, another team member. Dr. Kessler told me personally that your understanding of their organizational structure was a key factor in their decision. I filed that information away. Dr. Elizabeth Kessler was Euronova's chief medical officer and had been one of my strongest advocates during negotiations. Jade seems very qualified, I said diplomatically. I'm sure she'll do fine. None of them looked convinced. Neither was I. I spent that first week documenting everything about the Euronova relationship, at least. That was how it appeared. In reality, I was taking stock of my position and making decisions about my future. By Wednesday, I had 3 important realizations. First, while Calvex owned the contract with Euronova, I owned the relationships. Every key decision-maker at Euronova had my personal contact information. Many had become something closer to friends than mere business contacts over the months of negotiations. Second, my non-compete agreement had a significant loophole. It prevented me from working for direct competitors, but said nothing about starting my own consultancy. Third, I wasn't the only one Bryce had pushed aside. In the 3 months since his arrival, at least 8 valuable employees had either been demoted, sidelined, or pressured to leave. Among them was Alyssa Gorman, our former operations director, who had quit rather than accept a diminished role. My phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Dr. Kessler. Sam, can we talk privately? Something doesn't feel right with this transition. And there it was, the first crack in what Bryce and Julian believed was a solid foundation. I arranged to call Dr. Kessler that evening from home, away from corporate ears. I don't understand why you won't be leading our implementation, she said immediately when I answered. We chose Calvex largely because of your approach. This new person, Jade, she sent us a project plan that completely ignores the phased approach we discussed. Jade has her own methodology, I replied carefully. I'm sure once you discuss your concerns. We tried, Elizabeth interrupted. She told us the phased approach was outdated and that her accelerated deployment model would give us better results. Sam, we have 23 hospitals across 5 countries. We can't just flip a switch overnight. I listened as she detailed more concerns. Jade had apparently dismissed several key stakeholders' input and was pushing for a centralized decision-making structure that simply wouldn't work with Euronova's federated governance model. I'm in an advisory role now, I explained. I can try to provide input, but Jade reports directly to our COO. There was a pause before Elizabeth responded. That's disappointing. Would you be open to continuing our conversations informally? Your insights are valuable to us, regardless of your title. Of course, I agreed. I'm still committed to making this project successful. But even as I said the words, a plan was forming in my mind. The next morning, I called Marcus Dell, who had left Calvex shortly after the Euronova contract signing another casualty of Bryce's restructuring. How do you feel about starting something new? I asked after catching up. Depends. Are you finally leaving that sinking ship? I'm considering it, but I need legal advice first. We met for lunch at a quiet restaurant far from Calvex's offices. Marcus listened intently as I outlined my situation and thoughts. So to be clear, he summarized, you want to know if you could start your own consultancy without violating your non-compete, and potentially work with Euronova if they chose to engage your services. Exactly. He considered this thoughtfully. Your non-compete prohibits you from working for direct competitors' companies that provide the same software Calvex does. But a pure strategy and implementation consultancy that doesn't sell software, that's a different business model entirely. And if Euronova were to decide they wanted additional support outside of their Calvex contract, that would be their decision entirely, Marcus replied with a slight smile. As long as you don't actively solicit them to breach their existing contract, you're on solid legal ground. I nodded, feeling the pieces click into place. I need one more perspective. Do you know how to reach Alyssa? Better than that, Marcus grinned. I had dinner with her last week. She's been doing freelance operations consulting and hating every minute of it. She misses being part of something meaningful. By the end of the week, I had registered a new business entity, LumaCore Partnerships. The name had significance for me, Luma, from illumination, bringing light and clarity, and core, representing the fundamental, essential nature of what we would provide, not software, but the human expertise that makes technology implementations actually succeed. I drafted a resignation letter but didn't submit it immediately. First, I needed to see how things would unfold with Euronova. I didn't have to wait long. 10 days after Jade took over, I received an urgent call from Henrik Voigt, Euronova's CIO. Sam, we have a problem, he began without preamble. The implementation team missed a critical regulatory requirement for our German facilities. They're trying to apply a standardized approach across all markets without acknowledging the legal differences. Have you spoken with Jade about this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. 3 times, Henrik sighed. She insists their standard protocol is best practice, and that our legal team is being unnecessarily cautious. Sam, we could face millions in fines if we get this wrong. I understand. Let me see what I can do. I scheduled a meeting with Jade, positioning it as an offer to share institutional knowledge. She accepted reluctantly, her calendar showing she could spare exactly 30 minutes. Jade Merrick was everything Bryce had described: young, poised, articulate, with the confident demeanor of someone who had achieved quick success and expected more of the same. She also, I soon discovered, possessed an alarming combination of overconfidence and inflexibility. I appreciate your concern, Sam, she said, after I tactfully raised the regulatory issues. But my team has implemented similar systems in 12 different countries. We know how to navigate compliance. European healthcare regulations vary significantly by country, I explained. Germany in particular has strict data sovereignty requirements which our standard compliance module addresses, she interrupted. The beauty of our approach is standardization. Euronova hired us for our expertise, not to create bespoke solutions for each location. I tried a different angle. The contract actually specifies adaptation to local regulatory environments. It was a key selling point. Her expression hardened slightly. That language is open to interpretation. Our approach satisfies the requirements while maintaining implementation efficiency. After 25 fruitless minutes, I realized she had no intention of changing course. More concerning, she didn't seem to grasp the severity of the issue or the damage it could do to the client relationship. I hope it works out, I said as I rose to leave. The Euronova team is quite particular about their requirements. Every client thinks their situation is unique, Jade replied dismissively. Once they see our results, these concerns will disappear. I nodded and left, knowing with certainty what would happen next. 3 days later, Dr. Kessler called again. This time, she was not alone. I was placed on speakerphone with Henrik Voigt and Marika de Vries, Euronova's CEO. Sam, we need your help, Marika began. We're considering pausing the implementation until we can resolve some fundamental issues with the approach. That would be a significant decision, I replied carefully. We understand that, Henrik said, but we can't proceed when our core requirements are being dismissed. We were sold a vision of partnership that isn't materializing. What would be helpful, Dr. Q. Kessler added, is if we could engage you directly as a consultant to help bridge this gap, someone who understands both Calvex's systems and our organizational needs. There it was, the opportunity I had anticipated. I took a measured breath before responding. Actually, I've recently established a consultancy focusing on strategic implementation for healthcare organizations. If you're interested, I could provide services through that entity, completely separate from my role at Calvex. That would be ideal, Marika responded immediately. Could you send us a proposal? Of course. I should note that my firm wouldn't be implementing the Calvex software that remains under your contract with them. We would provide strategic oversight and guidance to ensure your specific needs are addressed within that framework. Understood. We look forward to your proposal. The call ended, and I sat back in my chair, heart racing despite my outwardly calm demeanor during the conversation. This was happening faster than I had anticipated. That evening, I drafted a comprehensive proposal for Lumacor's services to Euronova. I was careful to position our role as complementary to, not replacing, Calvex's implementation work. The proposal emphasized strategic guidance, regulatory compliance oversight, and change management support areas where Jade's approach was clearly lacking. I also finalized my resignation letter. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Julian and Bryce. It was time to make my exit. I wanted to inform you both that I've decided to pursue other opportunities, I stated after settling into a chair across from them. Today will be my last day. Julian looked genuinely shocked. Bryce's expression was harder to read, something between suspicion and satisfaction. This is unexpected, Julian managed. Is there anything we can do to change your mind? Perhaps we moved too quickly with the restructuring. Too late, I thought. I appreciate that, but I've made my decision. I've already accepted another position. Not technically a lie, I had accepted my own offer to lead Lumacor. Where will you be going? Bryce asked, his tone deliberately casual. I'm starting my own consulting practice, I replied honestly, focusing on strategic healthcare implementation. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're aware of your non-compete obligations. Completely, I assured him. I won't be selling or implementing competitive software solutions. Well, Julian interjected, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. We wish you the best. Sam, you've made invaluable contributions here. I thanked them both, handed over my resignation letter, and left the office for the last time, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. 2 days later, Lumacor Partnerships had its first client. Euronova signed our proposal without a single revision, agreeing to our full asking price without negotiation, a clear indication of their desperation for competent guidance. I immediately reached out to Marcus and Alyssa, who both agreed to join as founding partners. We also brought on Diana and Raj from my former team at Calvex, who resigned within days of my departure. Our first order of business was a comprehensive audit of the Calvex implementation plan for Euronova. The results were troubling, but not surprising. Jade's approach ignored critical regional requirements in favor of a one-size-fits-all methodology that prioritized speed over sustainability. We developed a detailed remediation strategy and presented it to Euronova's leadership team. They were impressed enough to take a significant step. They formally requested that Calvex designate Lumicore as their authorized implementation partner for the project. Predictably, Bryce refused. In an email that Marika later forwarded to me, he stated that Calvex has full confidence in our implementation methodology and team. External consultants would only introduce unnecessary complications. What happened next was entirely Euronova's decision. They invoked a clause in their contract that allowed them to halt implementation if they had reasonable concerns about regulatory compliance or patient safety. They didn't cancel the contract outright, they simply paused it pending resolution of their concerns. Meanwhile, they expanded Lumicore's scope to include development of a phased implementation strategy that properly addressed their specific needs. The news sent shockwaves through Calvex. Julian called me directly, his voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "What the hell is going on? Sam Euronova has halted the entire project and mentioned your firm as their advisor. They have concerns about the implementation approach," I replied calmly. "They've engaged us to help develop a more suitable strategy." "This feels an awful lot like you poaching our client," he accused. "Euronova approached us, Julian. They're still your client. They simply want an implementation that respects their requirements. Bryce says you're positioning yourself to take over the contract completely." I sighed. "That's not accurate. We don't sell or implement software, we provide strategic guidance. If Calvex is willing to adapt its approach to meet Euronova's needs, this can still be a successful partnership for everyone." "I'll have to take this to the board," he warned. "I understand. I'm available if they have questions." The call ended, and I immediately briefed Marcus on the conversation. "They'll try to claim we violated the non-compete," I predicted. "Let them try," he responded confidently. "We've been meticulously careful to stay within the boundaries. Besides, they have a bigger problem, a $500 million contract hanging in the balance." He was right. A week later, Calvex's board reached out to request a meeting with me. I agreed, specifying that Marcus would accompany me as Lumicore's legal counsel. The boardroom felt different from the visitors' side of the table. 7 board members, including Julian and Bryce, sat across from us. The tension was palpable. "Ms. Rourke," began Victoria Harlow, the board chair, "we've asked you here to discuss the situation with Euronova and find a path forward that serves everyone's interests." "I appreciate the opportunity," I replied. "Lumicore is committed to ensuring Euronova's successful digital transformation." "Let's be direct," interjected Richard Way, another board member. "Euronova has made it clear they won't proceed without your involvement. They've also indicated they're prepared to cancel the contract entirely if a suitable arrangement can't be reached." Bryce shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Julian stared at the table. "That would be unfortunate for all parties," I acknowledged. "Euronova needs the Calvex solution, and I'm sure Calvex values the relationship." "What exactly are you proposing?" Victoria asked. "A collaborative approach," I answered. "Lumicore would oversee the strategic implementation, ensuring compliance, managing change, and serving as the bridge between Calvex's technical team and Euronova's organizational needs. Calvex would maintain the primary contract and provide the technology and technical implementation resources." "And your compensation for this role?" Richard inquired. "We've already established terms with Euronova. They're prepared to fund our services separately from their Calvex contract." Victoria nodded slowly. "And if we refuse this arrangement?" Marcus spoke for the first time. "Euronova has expressed their intent quite clearly. They value Sam's expertise and Lumicore's approach. They'll make whatever decisions they feel are necessary to protect their investment and objectives." The implication hung heavily in the air. Refuse, and lose the largest contract in company history. After a tense discussion, the board asked for time to deliberate privately. Marcus and I waited in an adjacent room for nearly an hour before being called back. Victoria addressed us with the formal tone of someone delivering a carefully considered decision. We've agreed to a collaborative arrangement. Calvex will maintain the primary contract with Euronova, with LumaCore designated as the authorized implementation partner. We'll need to formalize the details, of course. I maintained my professional demeanor, but inside, I felt vindicated. We look forward to working together for Euronova's benefit. As we rose to leave, Bryce's icy glare followed us out. He knew he had lost this battle, but I suspected the war was far from over. The next few weeks were intense. We formalized our partnership agreement with Calvex, established clear boundaries and responsibilities, and began the work of correcting the implementation plan. Jade was officially removed from the Euronova account, a condition Euronova had insisted upon. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the industry. Healthcare technology is a surprisingly small world, and the story of how a newly formed consultancy had effectively taken control of a $480 million implementation project made for compelling gossip. Then something unexpected began to happen. Other Calvex clients started reaching out. First came Meridian Health System, a network of hospitals across the southeastern United States. Their CIO called me directly.